I'm Margaret Chen, 78 years old. When my son died in a car accident, his wife Linda immediately tried to evict me from the house my late husband and I bought 40 years ago. She claimed my son owned half the house, and now she inherited his share. Linda hired lawyers, filed eviction papers, and told the court I was a confused old woman squatting in her property. She thought I was just a helpless elderly widow. She didn't know I'm a retired real estate attorney who spent 50 years handling property disputes. I had documents proving she was lying, and I was about to destroy her completely. Subscribe now. Hit that bell icon for more revenge stories. I'm Margaret Chen, 78 years old, and I live in San Francisco. My husband David died 12 years ago from cancer. We'd been married for 46 years and bought our house in 1984 for $80,000. It's now worth $2.4 million. My son Richard was my only child. He married Linda 8 years ago when he was 39 and she was 32. I never trusted Linda. She was obsessed with money and constantly asked Richard about our family assets. When your mother dies, you'll inherit that house, right? She'd say during family dinners. It made me uncomfortable, but Richard loved her. 6 months ago, Richard died in a car accident. He was 47. Losing my son destroyed me. I'd already lost David, and now Richard was gone too. I was alone at 78 with nothing but memories and grief. 2 weeks after Richard's funeral, Linda showed up at my house with a lawyer. Margaret, we need to talk about this property. Richard owned half this house as your son and heir. Now I've inherited his share. You need to either buy me out for $1.2 million, or we're selling the house and splitting the money. I was stunned. Linda, this house belonged to David and me. We bought it in 1984. Richard never owned any part of it. Linda's lawyer, a man named Frank Morrison, handed me legal papers. Mrs. Chen, California law states that children can inherit property interests from their parents even before the parents die if certain conditions are met. Your son had an equitable interest in this house. My client now owns that interest. You have 90 days to arrange financing or we'll force a sale. I was devastated. Not only had I lost my son, but now his widow was trying to steal my home. Linda smirked at me. Richard told me you'd fight this, but you're old and you don't understand property law. This house is half mine now. Accept it. They left, and I sat in my living room crying. Then I stopped crying and started thinking. Linda had made a critical mistake. She assumed that because I'm 78 years old, I didn't understand real estate law. She was wrong. Before I retired at 72, I spent 50 years as a real estate attorney, specializing in property disputes, title issues, and inheritance law. I'd handled thousands of cases exactly like this. I knew every trick, every loophole, every strategy people use to steal property from elderly owners, and I knew Linda's claim was completely fraudulent. I pulled out my files. The house deed was in David's and my names as joint tenants with right of survivorship. When David died, I automatically became the sole owner. Richard never had any ownership interest, equitable or otherwise. Linda's entire legal theory was garbage, but I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I hired a private investigator named Sarah Kim. I need you to investigate Linda Chen. Find out everything, her finances, her background, her previous relationships, everything. Sarah came back 2 weeks later with shocking information. Linda had done this before. 6 years before she married Richard, she'd married a man named Thomas Park, who died in a suspicious accident. Linda had inherited his life insurance and immediately moved across the country. There was an investigation, but no charges were filed due to insufficient evidence. More importantly, Linda was broke. She'd spent all of Richard's life insurance money within 3 months of his death. Gambling debts, luxury shopping, expensive trips. She owed $70,000 to various creditors. She needed money desperately, and my house worth $2.4 million was her target. I also discovered that Frank Morrison, her lawyer, had been disciplined twice by the state bar for unethical conduct involving elderly clients. He specialized in helping people steal property from elderly homeowners through fraudulent legal claims. I had everything I needed. It was time to strike back. I hired the best real estate litigation attorney in San Francisco, a woman named Catherine Wu. I showed her all my documents, the deed, the title history, Richard's birth certificate proving he was never an owner, and Sarah's investigation report about Linda's history. Catherine smiled. Margaret, Linda's claim is completely fraudulent, but we're not just going to defeat her claim. We're going to destroy her financially and professionally, and we're going to get that lawyer, Frank Morrison, disbarred. We filed a countersuit against Linda for fraud, attempted theft, elder abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and slander of title. We also filed a formal complaint against Frank Morrison with the California State Bar. The evidence was overwhelming. The deed clearly showed I was the sole owner. Richard had never been on the title. Linda's equitable interest theory was invented out of thin air. Frank Morrison had drafted legal documents he knew were fraudulent to intimidate an elderly widow. We demanded Linda sit for a deposition. Catherine questioned her for 6 hours. Ms. Chen, do you have any documentation showing Richard owned any part of this house? He was her son. Sons inherit from their mothers. That's not how property law works. Do you have a deed, a title document, anything showing Richard's ownership? Frank told me the law says, I'm not asking what your lawyer told you. I'm asking for documents. Do you have any? No. Did you know when you filed this claim that you had no legal basis for it? Linda's face went red. Frank said we had a case. Did you know Margaret Chen was a real estate attorney for 50 years? Linda went pale. What? You didn't know? You tried to steal property from a woman who spent half a century specializing in exactly this kind of property dispute? You thought she was just a confused old woman who wouldn't understand property law? Linda started crying. The deposition ended. Frank Morrison was worse. When Catherine questioned him, he admitted he'd never actually researched whether Linda's claim had any legal merit. He'd just filed papers to scare me into settling. I assumed an elderly woman wouldn't fight back. I've done this before with other elderly clients. They usually just pay to make it go away. Catherine looked at him with disgust. You've built a practice on defrauding elderly people? That's not what I meant. But it was exactly what he meant, and now it was on the record. The judge ruled in my favor on everything. Linda's claim was dismissed with prejudice. The judge found her liable for fraud, attempted theft, and elder abuse. She was ordered to pay me $400,000 in damages and attorney fees. Frank Morrison was referred to the state bar for disciplinary proceedings. 6 months later, he was disbarred for a pattern of unethical conduct involving elderly clients. His career was over. But I wasn't done with Linda. She couldn't pay the $400,000 judgment. I had the court seize her assets, her car, her jewelry, her bank accounts. I garnished her wages. She filed for bankruptcy, but the judgment against her wasn't dischargeable because it was based on fraud. Linda also faced criminal charges. The district attorney prosecuted her for elder abuse and attempted grand theft. She pled guilty and received 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service. Sarah's investigation into Richard's death also led to a deeper inquiry. The police reopened the case and found evidence that Linda had tampered with Richard's car brakes. She was charged with murder. The trial is ongoing, but prosecutors are seeking a life sentence. Linda thought she could steal my house because I'm 78 years old. She thought age meant vulnerability and ignorance. She forgot that age also means experience, expertise, and 5 decades of professional knowledge. I'm still living in my house. It's worth $2.4 million, and it's mine, just like it's been for 40 years. Linda is facing life in prison for murder, and her lawyer lost his license. People sometimes ask if I feel guilty about destroying Linda's life so completely. The answer is no. She tried to steal my home while I was grieving my son's death. She assumed I was helpless because of my age. She learned that 78 years old means 50 years of legal expertise, and expertise is power. I'm Margaret Chen. I'm 78 years old. I'm a retired real estate attorney, and I'm a woman who fought back when someone tried to rob me of my home. Linda and Frank Morrison both learned that underestimating elderly people is the biggest mistake you can make. The end.